Hi there, Dr. Carmen McGinnis here. Today on the channel, this video, we're going to talk about intuitive ability, what it is, how to hone it, 12 tips, 12. Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Carmen McGinnis, and on this channel we discuss relationships of all sorts, including what I call the primary relationship, which is the relationship that we have with ourselves. Today we're going to discuss an aspect of relationship that doesn't really touch everyone directly, but it does touch us all indirectly, and that is intuition. All of us either has a heightened intuitive ability, or we know someone in our sphere, friends and acquaintances, who has a heightened sense of intuition. So some people refer to this as empathy, and I really don't use that term because to me an empath is someone who specifically has the ability to experience other people's emotions. An intuitive probably has that ability as well, but they also have the ability to tap into just good and bad feelings about people, situations, and events that give them a deeper understanding of what direction to go in with those things, people, or events, situations. So for the purposes of today's talk, that's what I'll be speaking about, both of those two things, empathy and just generalized intuitiveness. And I'm going to refer to intuitives rather than empaths throughout the talk. So intuition has been described as knowing something without thinking it through. Some refer to intuition as deep knowing. The dictionary definition of intuition is the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. I think the word immediate is an important aspect of how intuition works, at least it is for me. It truly is a flash or a burst of insight. A common misunderstanding about intuition is that we are either intuitive or logical, each of us. And that simply isn't true. There's a time for intuition and a time for logic. And clearly everyone has some of both. I don't think there's anyone other than Mr. Spock, perhaps, on Star Trek, who is just purely logical. But we all tend to be higher in one or the other. And those of us who are very high in intuition are what I would consider to be intuitives. However, and this is number 1 in my list of 12, be aware that each shuts down the other. When we are intuitive, our logic tends to turn off. And when we are logical, our intuition tends to shut down. I think of intuition rather like an earthquake. Bam, it hits. And you know it hit. Just like you feel an earthquake in your body because of the movement, you also feel intuition in your body. At least I do. Sticking with the earthquake analogy, we might think of the thoughts that follow the earthquake of intuition as the aftershocks, the logical aftershocks of intuition. Just as the aftershocks of an earthquake are attempts to resettle the Earth's plates, the thoughts that follow intuition, the logical thoughts, are our own attempt to make sense of this new information that hit with a burst of intuition. The problem is that we disturb the flow of intuition when we start thinking and try to make sense of what is actually more like a feeling. Because intuition is more like a feeling. It varies for all of us, but many of us feel intuition in our heart or our gut or both. Sometimes it's felt behind the eyes, in the area of the third eye chakra, and interestingly, this is the same area that senses light when the eyes are closed. And some people, myself included, feel intuition along the forearms, running down into the fingertips. And you'll see these people will sort of do this when they're getting an intuitive thought, or rub their hands together, or shake their hands out. It's believed by some researchers of intuition that all of these sensations come from the heart area. And I'm going to get a little technical here, so bear with me just for a few seconds. As a licensed heart math provider, which I am, and I have been since 2011, I believe, I'm among those who believe that intuition does come from the heart area, that the heart is a major player in the pathway. That said, I also believe that the subconscious plays a large part in intuition, which is another theory that you'll see in the studies, actual research on intuition. We frequently know things without conscious awareness of them, as stated in the dictionary definition of it. Though I might not be able to tell you what color a particular person was wearing the last time I saw him or her, I would be able to do that under hypnosis, a means of assessing the subconscious and subconscious data. So I think there's something there going on in the subconscious as part of the pathway. And this is where the heart comes in. And this is number 2 in my list of 12. It's believed that the heart acts as a sort of go-between for the conscious and the subconscious mind. This has been a running theory for quite some time now. Well, why? Perhaps it's because the ego, the conscious mind, likes to be in charge of things. It's its way of keeping us safe. And all those making sense of things, those aftershocks, those logical aftershocks, start up through the conscious mind, through the ego. But the heart, on the other hand, is non-biased. It doesn't make judgments. And there are also pathways from the heart to the brain. For example, we know from research into mindfulness that if I feel gratitude in my heart area, if I have a sense of gratitude for someone or something in my life, my mind is calmed. So here's how the heart and the subconscious work together to facilitate intuition, in my opinion, from what I've read from quite a lot of data. And this is number 3 in my list of 12 things. The intuitive stores tiny abstract and arbitrary details or patterns in his or her subconscious, just as we all do. Only there are some big differences between the intuitive and the rest of the population. There's a thinner veil between the conscious and the subconscious of the intuitive because the intuitive is open to messages coming through the heart rather than filtered through the ego. The intuitive is adept at stilling the aftershocks, that's another reason, and the intuitive forms a gestalt with these seemingly arbitrary details. In other words, the intuitive puts it all together to make sense of that which, if left alone as arbitrary details, would appear meaningless. C.E. Lewis said, "Isn't it funny how day by day nothing changes, but when you look back, everything is different?" Well, for an intuitive, day by day, and even minute by minute, are comprised of a myriad of patterns that form the gestalt. So the pathway is, in my opinion, see, hear, smell, taste, and or feel the input. Of course, all data, all that we see, hear, smell, taste, and feel, goes to both the conscious and subconscious mind, but it's the subconscious data that later gets parsed through the non-judgmental heart and churned out to the conscious mind as a gestalt. And greater than the sum of its parts, because that's what happens when we form a gestalt from many seemingly arbitrary details, which were only arbitrary data until the formation of that gestalt. The intuitive resists the urge to make sense of the earthquake, stills the logical mind, and instead braces the inner knowing. So you can see how this is a skill that gets honed, and some people push it away. We'll talk about that in a moment here. And this is number 4 coming up. Intuition might present as something you just know. That happens with me often. I just know something, and I often feel like, well, someone must have told me that and I've forgotten, or there must be some way that I know this, but frequently it's something that I can't possibly have known. But you don't know why you know it, how it's possible that you could know it. It might also present as a sensation in the body, in the areas that I mentioned, for instance, or it might be an image or phrase that comes to mind, or repeated thought, or something you suddenly notice in the environment that hadn't caught your attention before. It's like the room hasn't changed, but you've changed somehow, or the eyes you're looking through have changed. I often have the sensation of just knowing. I've learned to avoid the temptation to question it or its source. You don't have to try to remember why or how you know when this happens, and indeed trying to remember that's all part of the aftershock thing, and may cause you to lose the intuition entirely, or lose faith in it, disbelieve what you know. If you start thinking, how do I know that? Who told me that? Why do I know that? How is this possible? Instead, and this is number 5 in my list of 12, simply act on the knowing in some way. If you're with someone, just start talking. Talk as if you simply know. And I often find myself saying these words, I'm not sure where this is coming from, but, or I'm not sure how I know this, but. When the person asks how you know, or questions what you're saying, just keep talking, because if you stop, you're going to stop the flow of intuitive knowing. Avoid the temptation to overthink or have to explain yourself. If it's a bodily sensation, there are some things you can do to notice the sensations in your body and to keep them awake long enough for you to gain the full intuition. And this is number 6. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a HeartMath licensed provider, and research coming out of the labs at HeartMath Institute indicates that those who notice slight variations in heart rate, what we call heart rate variability, are more intuitive than those who don't. And I believe this holds true for all bodily sensations. Hair standing on your skin, for instance, flushing, chills, all of these can be indicators that you should pay attention to what's happening. And here's number 7. If you don't get a strong hit of what these changes mean when they happen, simply notice them, stay with them, stay in the moment. Don't go to the thoughts, don't go to the logical mind, to the ego, and identify whether they are a good feeling or a bad feeling, if you're able to. Usually, at a minimum, we can get that out of it. Is this a good sensation, or is this some sense of slight dread, or just being careful? You need to be cautious. It might not come right away. Watch for other signs if it doesn't for the rest of the day, the next day, and listen to your dreams that night. Go to bed with the intention to remember your dreams. So, Focus on the body, ignore the aftershocks or residual thoughts, and try not to make sense of it. Also, and this is number 8, tame your tendency to overthink and overfocus on the good aspects that come up and ignore the bad ones. Ignoring the bad stuff will, in time, teach you to mistrust your intuition. When you feel it, notice it. Let it happen. If it's a yucky, bad feeling about a person or situation, hold it loosely. You don't have to make out with this thought. Just hold it loosely. Don't hide it, and don't try to hide from it. Because intuitive people tend to be other-focused. We often push our own negative feelings about people under the carpet. Don't do that. It will only lead to no good. The bad things you sensed will happen. There will be an outcome. And then you'll just be angry and disappointed in yourself for not heeding your own warning. Or it will erupt. All those bad feelings you had initially about that person will erupt in anger at them, and they won't have a clue where it's coming from. So the bottom line, when you have justified concerns about or criticisms of someone, concerns about someone or criticisms of them, you almost have an obligation to yourself and to them to say it, at least to yourself. If you hold it in, it's just going to become the monster in your closet. And it's going to rear its ugly head, possibly at them, and almost certainly at you. Intuitives tend to be peacekeepers, but it's not healthy to keep the peace at the expense of yourself, or at the expense of someone that you might have been able to help. So go there. Go to the bad stuff. Number 9, intuition isn't a complete package or of step-by-step directions. It presents as either an impulse to take a first step, step 1 in a series, when maybe you haven't got a clue where you're going even. Just a step in that direction, and you certainly don't yet know step 2 or 3 either. So you haven't got a clue what the finished picture is, but you have an impulse to take a step, whatever it is. Or it might present as the finished picture with no steps whatsoever. And in some cases, it's actually up to the logical mind to try to figure out that part. So I have this intuition that I should go live in Italy, and I feel strongly about it. Now I'm going to kick in the logical mind a little bit when the steps don't come. How am I going to get there? How am I going to support myself? Where will I live? Where will I stay? Things like that. And number 10, intuitives often tell me, as I've coached many of them, that they're not good at emotions. I hear that from them. I'm just not good at emotions. I think this happens when we try to resist feeling the emotions of others. Their emotions tend to get clogged up inside our, I guess you could think of it as a pipeline. 2 things can go wrong when we do this. We can begin to radiate the emotions of others, almost like a mirror, because we're not letting it in. People will say things to you like, "You look sad," or "Are you okay today? Are you worried about something?" When what's really happening is that other people's emotions are just bouncing off of you because you're not letting them run through you as an intuitive really should when they're functioning well. And I find this happens a lot with either very young intuitives or with intuitives who have come into their awareness of their intuitive ability very recently, of any age. Or we can shut down and start to feel cold and impenetrable. That's the other thing that can go horribly wrong. And there's nothing sadder than an intuitive who refuses to intuit. We're talking depression, because those emotions are still around you. The sensations that you have about your own life and the emotions of other people are still there. So instead of shutting down, instead of radiating all of that or shutting down, we need to learn to let the emotions of others run through us so that we understand them, so that we read them, but don't hold on to them. Once we've read them, we don't need to hold on to them anymore. And this also leaves space for our own emotions too. I find when I coach people who've been in relationships with toxic individuals that, and I'm talking about empathic people, intuitives, that they will often tell me, I knew it from the beginning. I should have listened to my heart, that's what they say, or my intuition. And this really leads to anger at yourself. And it can also lead to a very prolonged relationship with someone that you could have ended it very quickly or not even got into the relationship had you heeded your own intuition. And number 11, not listening to your truth leads to self-doubt. Let me explain. When you have an intuitive need, treat yourself like you would a child who had a need. Don't tell yourself, no, you can't have that thing, but rather explain why. Just as I did a minute ago with moving to Italy. I'm not going to tell myself, no, you can't move to Italy, even though you really, really want to. So, for example, let's use a different one. If someone hates their job, and I've been through this one with a lot of people, and their intuition is screaming at them to quit, like having a full-blown temper tantrum screaming, like won't get out of bed in the morning, won't get in the car to make the commute, etc. Meanwhile, your logical mind is saying, but wait, we need an income, we need a job. And this can lead to a deadlock if you don't encourage a little chat between your logical mind and your intuition. Intuitives have the ability to see an endless array of possibilities, but intuition doesn't come with a playbook, as I said earlier, or a set of sequences and rules. It doesn't tell us when to select one or the other of those possibilities and which one to select, nor does it tell us what sequence to follow to get to that goal, to that possibility. So bring your intuitive and logical selves together for a chat. Write down all the reasons to quit that job and all the reasons to stay. Now your intuitive self knows that this time you can't just give in and say, okay. Then ask your intuitive self what it needs, because there's something within that list. When you wrote that list, it could be, I'm tired, I feel overworked, I feel overburdened, nobody else is carrying the weight around there. So maybe a vacay is in order, or a work from home schedule on, say, Mondays and Fridays, or just Wednesday would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Or a later start time in the morning so that you can give the morning traffic a miss, or maybe a raise so that you feel more appreciated. So here's the last one, number 12, last piece of advice. When you're out there in the world and it all seems a little crazy, a little brittle, a little too sharp, like you can feel everyone's emotions and you're getting a read on people that you're just meeting and giving them advice and all that sort of thing, and staying away from this person and attracted to that person and you don't even know why. And you just really want to stop, but what you need to do is just let it come. Try thinking of what you do as a sort of bubble around you. This really, really helped me when I came up from my own coach years ago, back in the mid-'80s when I was coached in my own intuition. This really helped me, this visualization. So other people's emotions might prick that bubble, but it doesn't pop it. It just, if you think of it as just sort of bending the bubble a little bit, that pinprick, and it doesn't touch you. You're still you, safe and sound. And you're not the bubble. You're in the bubble. When you begin to master that ideology and the skills around it, you'll find you get more Zen-like, um, while you're intuiting, which is a safe way to be. That'll make you, when you get that Zen-like calm, that's going to make you a calmer, happier person, because you can regulate your own emotions because you're not regulating everybody else's. And you can regulate your own responses. And when you can regulate your own emotions and responses better, it tends to help those around you. Because when you can do the work more comfortably, what you have to give, what you have to offer, presents more palatably to people. It feels more on target. So that's what I have for you today. I hope this has been helpful. I appreciate your attention for a very long 26 minutes. And I look forward to seeing you midweek for my midweek sneak peek. Until then, have a wonderful and blessed week. Stay safe. See you soon.